Well, John continues. He describes 7 signs of what Christ's perfect salvation is about. He does this in 2 ways. Number 1, the first 3 of Christ's 7 miraculous signs show how salvation is received by a believer. You want to tune up whether you're believing correctly? You say, can you believe incorrectly? Certainly. The Apostle Paul wrote in the book of Romans, lest you've believed in vain. I want you not to believe in vain. There are people that are very religious that will go to hell. There are people that are very Christianish. They act, they talk, they work, they serve, they sing, they share, but they've believed in vain because they have not had salvation the way that the Lord presents it in His Word. What does He present? Well, first of all, through the first sign. What was the first sign? In John 2, 1 through 11, Jesus turned the water into wine. What was that for? I mean, to save the people money, to show that they could drink alcohol. What was the deal? The deal was He declared His salvation is always miraculous. Nobody else can turn water into wine except over a long period of time. Only Jesus can miraculously do it just instantaneously. So salvation is always miraculous. It's supernatural. It's something only God can do. We can't crank it up. We can't work it up. We can't fit the pieces together and find out a way to do it ourselves. It's a miracle. Secondly, the second sign. What was the second sign? When Christ healed the nobleman's son in chapter 4, verses 46 to 54. What is that all about? Through that sign, He declares His salvation is only by faith. It's only by faith. It's only appropriated, received, and offered to us by faith. And I remind you, the limitation of God's atoning work is only unbelief. Those who Jesus said it. Why won't you come to me that you may have life? They did not believe in the name of the Son of God. And so this whole book is about, all of this is written in the Gospel of John for us to believe who He is, that He miraculously saves us, and if we believe Him, His salvation is ours by faith. Thirdly, how is salvation received? When Christ heals the paralytic. That's chapter 5 now we've gotten to in the Gospel by John, the first 9 verses, the pools of Bethesda. What is that about? He declares His salvation is only by grace. There's a curious phrase in the Gospel that's beautiful. At different times it's described different ways. My favorite one is when it says, behold, Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. Do you remember that? And when Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, the blind men began to cry out and say, have mercy on us. Jesus passed by, they cried out to Him. The message that Christ gives here is that salvation is only by grace. There were lots of sick people laying around that pool. Jesus walked by one and graciously offered to him the opportunity for His healing touch. Jesus promised that He lights everyone that comes into the world. That means every person has the light of the gospel shine on them, and if they refuse it, then they've refused His grace. They have not believed. And they, by that, Paul says in Romans 9, fit themselves for destruction. That's how salvation is received. Well, He doesn't stop there. The next 4 of these mighty signs show the result of salvation. If you've never received Christ, you need to miraculously come by faith, by grace. But what happens once this happens? Well, first of all, here's the 4th sign. When Christ feeds the 5,000 in chapter 6, the first 14 verses. Do you remember that? He got them all to sit down, little groups of 50. And they look like flowers in a beautiful garden. That's how Peter remembers it. But in in John's Gospel, 6, 1 to 14, there's this beautiful little expression that there was too much, more than they could eat, and they had to pick up baskets and baskets and baskets full. What was that all about? It's to show us that Christ declared His salvation brings inexhaustible satisfaction. If you read the news very much, you find that even multiplied millions and even multiplied billions cannot satisfy people. Have you read the goings-on of the wealthiest family in the world, the Windsor family, as in the Queen of England family? They are the largest landowning, the wealthiest people. They make the Arabs look pale and weak and sickly with their absolute huge British inheritance. Those people live inexhaustible in their desires. I'm not picking on them. They're nice people, have pretty houses, and I pay $20 with other people in the church to go through Windsor Castle. Yes, but you know what those people declare? Money cannot buy happiness. Look at the movie stars. Look at the ones that are constantly testing positive for drugs and going to rehabilitation centers and living a life of constant orgies, and the rock stars that hang themselves in hotel rooms after even the drugs give out, and they just have nothing to live for. And Jesus says, I offer to you a satisfaction that never runs out. In fact, you will have more than you need for the day. You'll have more than you need for your life. Salvation. What's the result in us? Inexhaustible satisfaction. Secondly, when Christ stilled the storm, later on in chapter 6, verses 16 to 21, that was the fifth sign that he did of the 7 signs, because he said, I did these signs, and that little phrase occurs 7 times. But when he stilled the storm, he declared his salvation brings complete peace. What does Isaiah say? The gospel in the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah. It says the wicked are like the troubled sea. They're restless. They're always foaming up. You ever been on the ocean after a storm and seen that scum stuff, this foam that's all green and brown and ugly, and there's trash in it and everything? That was the picture Isaiah evoked under the inspiration of God's Spirit to show what the life of an unbeliever is like. They're always foaming up their own shame. They're not peace. What is the work of righteousness? Isaiah goes on to say, the work of righteousness shall be peace. So what does salvation result in the life of a believer? It brings complete peace. We are peaceful in storms. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. We're peaceful because we have peace with God, and He brings us peace of God in our lives. Next, the third of the results of salvation, when Christ healed the blind man in chapter 9, the first 7 verses, He declares His salvation brings light to our souls. We aren't in despair. We aren't hopeless. We aren't helpless. We see that the very light to guide us is within us. And finally, the last result, when Christ raises Lazarus, He declares His salvation brings the power of an endless life. And you know, this changes us. That's John 11:38 to 45. I always remember this because the Bible postures us as on our way going home to heaven. And I go and prepare a place, a room for you, right? Jesus told them in John 14, He says, don't be troubled. Don't even worry about death. Remember once we took 90-some people to Israel, and we stopped over in Rome on the way, and I was taking them all around. But this was a real California ritzy group, and they wanted ultra deluxe. And so I remember Bonnie and I labored over it, and finally we said, okay, we'll get one of the only 5-star hotels in Rome. It's called the Excelsior. You ought to look it up sometime. $500 a night per room. And these people, you know, they came off their big bus, and, you know, here are Bonnie and I with our, you know, Goodwill suitcases, you know, pulling in, and we got into this crusty lobby, and you should have seen, I mean, it was real Persian rugs, and they let you walk on them, and real crystal chandeliers, and they brought out, I'll always remember how big the cups were. In fact, we've always looked for cups that big. They had these hot chocolate cups, because, you know, it's rainy in Rome a lot, and so these huge hot chocolate cups, they were this big around, and they looked like bowls, actually, and these little chocolate pirettes, you know, and everybody's sitting around sipping their chocolate and eating their pirette, waiting for their room. Going to that room, in my mind, was much like going to heaven because it was so beautiful. I didn't see anybody there going, oh, any day we're going to lose them. They're going to go to their room. You know, they're going to die. No, the people were actually excited about going to their rooms in this hotel. And you know what? If we look forward to heaven, like people look forward to checking into their rooms, if we really believe Jesus is preparing us a deluxe, ultra deluxe room, and we're just in the lobby, and when we get sick, and when we get diseases, and when our bodies begin failing, it's just a little bit closer. And I still remember when the first room came and they walked up and they said, Smith? Oh, the people were so excited. They just grabbed their little suitcases and went off with their 2 little people that took them to their room. That's what death should be like for believers. A hastening for a glad surprise going to our Father's house. All because we have the power of an endless life. This is not it. This is not our dead end. We are not stuck here marooned. We are on our way home. And we're trying to show people and tell people about our Father in heaven.